Today's theme is, What is Natural Radiation, Volume 2. Let's get started. Well, last time, regarding natural radiation, I talked about overall dose on people in Japan and other countries, as well as radiation coming from outer space, and radiation emitted from the Earth. So this time, I would like to talk about the remaining issues, that is, impacts caused by breathing and eating foods. As explained in the previous video, the radioactive nuclides, which make impact on us through breathing, are mainly radon and thoron.
I have heard the words radon and thoron, but I have no idea what they are. Could you elaborate them in detail?
Radon is a radioisotope of radon with a mass number of 222, and thoron is a radioisotope of radon with a mass number of 220. Both of them are radioisotopes of radon, but sometimes they are still called with different names, as a remnant of the time when they were thought as different elements. Radon and thoron are produced through alpha decays of radium-226 and 224 respectively, which were introduced in another video. They are in a gaseous state at room temperature, so they exist in the air around us. Their radioactive concentrations are different from regions to regions, and globally. For example, in countries in Northern Europe, they tend to be high, due to geological reason, and the large number of stone buildings. In addition, both radon and thoron are heavier than the air, so they are likely to stay indoors, especially in space like underground, and sometimes measures like ventilation are necessary, in places with high radioactive concentration. By the way, compared with dose caused by radon and thoron through breathing, the amount is considerably less, but due to smoking, people are also exposed to radiation, emitted from radioactive materials like lead and polonium. So I would say that it would be good to stop smoking when possible.
I think that I have heard before that radioactive materials are also contained in foods, which we eat on a daily basis, but could you tell me the reasons for that?
Of course. For example, as I have just mentioned earlier, radioactive materials are contained in the Earth, and plants sometimes absorb the radioactive materials from the Earth. In addition, radioactive materials are concentrated in the food chains in the terrestrial and in the marine ecosystem. By eating foods with radioactive materials, which are included through these processes, we are taking radioactive materials into our body on a daily basis. As introduced in the previous video, dose to one Japanese person from foods is around 0.99 millisievert per year, and when going into detail for the breakdown of radioactive nuclides, lead-210 and polonium-210 are around 0.8 millisievert, potassium-40 is around 0.18 millisievert, carbon-14 is around 0.01 for millisievert, and tritium is around 0.00000 for 9 millisievert. If I may elaborate further each nuclide in detail, first of all, lead-210 and polonium-210, which account for largest proportion, are produced during the process of decay of radon-222, which I have just earlier introduced, and unlike the radon, they exist as solid materials in the room temperature. They are deposited on the surface of ground, or settle out in rivers and the ocean, followed by absorption into living organisms like fish, through food chain, and through our diet, they are taken into our bodies on a daily basis. However, it is not the dose which makes negative impact on people's health, so in terms of radiation protection, in our daily life, it is not necessary to worry about eating them too much. For the next, I would like to talk about potassium-40, which accounts for the large proportion, after the lead and polonium. In the first place, along with carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen, potassium is one of the essential elements, which makes up human tissues. And around 0.01% of potassium, which exist in nature, is potassium-40, that is a radioactive isotope of potassium, and we could say that it is included in almost all kinds of foods. However, radioactivity concentration varies greatly, depending on each foodstuff. For example, talking about rice, its radioactivity concentration is around 30 becquerel per kilogram. For milk, it is around 50 becquerel per kilogram. For beef, it is around 100 becquerel per kilogram. For fish, it is also around 100 becquerel per kilogram. For dry milk, it is around 200 becquerel per kilogram. For spinach, it is also around 200 becquerel per kilogram. For potato chips, it is around 400 becquerel per kilogram. For green tea, it is around 600 becquerel per kilogram. For dried shiitake mushroom, it is around 700 becquerel per kilogram. For dried kelp, it is around 2000 becquerel per kilogram, and so forth.
Radioactivity concentration of dried kelp is considerably higher than other foodstuffs, but are there any specific reasons for that?
Well, I think, for example, that the fact that seaweed like kelp has a long growth period, that kelp has a characteristic easily to absorb radioactive materials, and that radioactivity concentration per kilogram increases as a result of decrease of moisture caused by drying the kelp could be taken as reasons for that. However, concentration of potassium in human body is maintained at a constant level, so I think that it will not cause any issues in terms of exposure to radiation, even if you eat so much kelp in your daily life.
Thank you very much, Daichi. Now I think that I am able to feel closer to the natural radiation that exists around us and affects us all the time.
That's good to hear, Hikari. Talking about radiation, it tends to attract attention in the context of an accident of a nuclear power plant or medical treatment in hospitals. However, if you get familiar with natural radiation around us, you can understand better about radiation, for example, by comparing with dose in such special occasions. Let me wrap up my lecture by providing you with the key points. As a continuous work from the previous video, this time, first of all, I talked about impact caused by breathing. Dose from breathing is around 0.47 millisievert per year in Japan, and around 1.26 millisievert per year in the world. This is caused by radiation, emitted from radon and thoron in the air, generated as a result of decay of radioactive materials contained in the Earth. However, dose differs greatly between regions, and for example, it tends to be high in Northern Europe and low in Japan. In addition, I explained that measures like ventilation are necessary in places with high dose on people. At last, I talked about impact caused by eating foods. Dose from foods is around 0.99 millisievert per year in Japan, and around 0.29 millisievert per year in the world. This is caused by radiation, emitted from radioactive materials contained in foods, which are absorbed through food chain and so on, and main radioactive nuclides are, for example, polonium-210, lead-210, and potassium-40. Contained radioactive concentration is different between kinds of foods, but anyway, I think that there is no need to worry about the negative effects due to daily diet. Okay, that's all for today. See you in the next video.